Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Aquarium Online Academy. My name is Amanda, and I'm coming to you live from the Aquarium of the Pacific in Long Beach, California. And I am joined in the studio today by my friends Courtney and Jana, who are going to be helping watch and assist all the things that are going on the screen behind me. So, I would love to invite you to participate along with this. If you're watching at a later time, you're welcome to email us at the number that you're going to see or the email address that you're going to see on the screen at the bottom here in just a moment. If you're watching live, you can text in any questions that you have. We're happy to answer them during our program. And that number is 562-286-1838. And again, if you're watching this later on a on our YouTube channel, you're welcome to still participate and send in any questions that you might have to live@lbaop.org. And then one of our educators will be happy to respond to those questions when we have a moment. So let's go ahead and get started and dive into our topic today. Today, the topic is Ask a Scientist. And the topic of asking a scientist is marine mammals. So if there's anything that you've been wanting to know about marine mammals, if there's some area of interest you have, feel free to contact us and let us know what your questions are, and we'll be happy to answer them during this program. So to start off, let's kind of talk about what is a marine mammal. Well, a marine mammal is just simply a mammal that lives in or around the ocean. So can you think of some marine mammals? What are some marine mammals that come to mind? Ooh, a seal. Okay, so seals, what does a Actually, let's look at a picture and see if it's a seal or not. Let's pull up a picture. Is this the animal that... They look kind of similar. There's definitely some things they have in common. They both have pretty big eyes, and they have whiskers on their face. We call them vibrissae. They both seem to, let's see, do they have fur? It looks like one's kind of furry. Are they both furry, or is one of those just skin? Because they don't look very fluffy, do they? But we do know that marine mammals have hair because they are a mammal. All mammals have hair. So if you look here, you might even be able to tell that there are hairs here. So even though it's short hair, yes, this mammal here and this mammal here both have hairs. They're just very, very short. So we know these two animals have hair. Got the big eyes. Also, look at their noses. What do you notice about the noses? I think it's kind of cool. They can actually shut their noses. It's kind of shaped like a triangle with two slits in it, and they can close those slits so that when they go diving underwater, they don't have to worry about getting water up their nose. Have you ever been diving in a pool and you hold your nose when you go in or when you jump in so you don't get water up your nose? Well, these animals don't have to worry about it. They just have a nose that closes off all by itself. But how can we tell? One of these is a seal, the other one is not. Do you see any other differences? Well, you may notice their color. Now, color is a good, obvious difference to tell the difference between these two animals. One is darker, one is lighter. One is a seal, one is something else. But that doesn't mean that every time you see a dark animal, it's a certain kind, or every time you see one that's spotted, it's a certain kind. But I will tell you, we have two different kinds of animals, or two different types of marine mammals in a particular exhibit here at the aquarium called our pinniped exhibit. Now, pinniped describes both of these animals behind me right now, plus an additional one, the walrus. But one is a seal, the other one is a sea lion. Now, how do we tell the difference? Well, besides just the color, there is a very significant difference right here. Do you see this? What is that thing sticking out? Do you see it on this one? I don't see anything sticking out, but what do we have sticking out on the sides of our heads? We've got ears. Yeah, we've got ear flaps. You could actually kind of hold on to your ears and pull them. Well, you can also do that with this animal right here, which is not a seal, it's a sea lion. So the sea lion has external ear flaps. So that's what external on the outside. So their flaps of their ears you can actually see on the outside. Whereas this one right here, take a look right here. Do you notice anything unusual? Well, they don't have anything sticking out, but there is a hole there. That is the ear of a seal. So seals have really smooth heads with no ears that stick out, but they do still have ears. It doesn't mean they can't hear. They just don't have the external flaps like we do. They just have a little hole on the side of their heads to help them hear. So that's one way you can tell the difference between a seal and a sea lion. And if you're trying to remember, how do I keep that straight? Which one has ears on the outside? Just think, if you look at a lion, you can see their ears. You can see the ears on a lion. You can see the ears on a sea lion. Okay? The seals, it's almost like it's sealed up. You can't see anything at all. And if you look carefully, though, now you're a scientist and you know if you look carefully, you can find the ear. They just look very different. Okay, so that's one difference. But let's take a look at the body of one of these animals, or both of them, and see if we can find any other differences between seals and sea lions. Because we've looked at their face, we've seen their ears, we've seen, oh, look at the nose on this one. This one has its nostrils open, so it's breathing right now, and it's not diving, it's not closing them up yet. And we can see all those vibrissae, all those feelers. Basically, those vibrissae help them to feel for things in the very dark or murky water so that they can help find their food. And maybe we can take a look at the flippers. So look at the flippers right here. We can see the one on this side. Maybe we can move this out so we can see the one on the other side. I don't know if we have much detail that we can really see. Maybe we can look for another. Oh, here we go. That makes it a little bit clearer. So you've got one flipper here, and then the back flippers we can't see very well. But this one is the seal. It's kind of got that speckled look to it. So our seals and sea lions that we happen to have harbor seals, which are known for having these speckles all over their body, and then the California sea lion, which is an all dark brown color. But if you were to look at them out of the water or even swimming in the water, you might notice some other things about their flippers. Now, let's see if we have another picture of our sea lion. Do we have a picture that would show this? Here we go, the front flippers. What would you say is different about the front flippers of the sea lion compared to the seal? What about the size? Is the size different? Which one is bigger? Yeah, the sea lion. See, you can see the ears. This is a sea lion. And those front flippers are huge. They're really big. And look at how it's kind of lifting up its body off the ground. It's lifting itself up, and there's even space in between those flippers and the rest of its body. It can actually walk on land kind of like a dog can. It can get along pretty well, lifting its body off the ground as it moves. So sea lions get along really well on land, whereas seals, if they're moving on land, they have those really short front flippers, and they just have to kind of scoot on their bellies. And it's a really funny word. We call it glumping when the seals move. They have this big blubbery belly that's kind of moving along like a caterpillar on the ground because they don't have those big front flippers. They can't lift themselves off the ground. But that also means that these animals swim very differently. I don't know if we happen to have any videos of seals or sea lions swimming, but you would notice the way and the fins that they use, or flippers that they use, are very different. So again, when we're looking at these animals, the sea lions have those big front flippers, the seals have the small ones, but if we were to see the back side of the seal, they actually have really big front flippers, and they kind of move them back and forth as they're swimming through the water. Whereas the sea lions, when they swim a little bit more like us. When we're swimming, we're mostly using our arms. And they have those big front flippers kind of like arms, but they're more like paddles because they're a lot wider than our arms and our hands. And so they can push themselves through the water with their big front flippers. So if you're ever watching, if you ever come visit an aquarium and you're watching a seal or a sea lion underwater, look at how they're swimming and what flippers they're using to swim. Are they using those front flippers or are they using the back flippers? Seals use their back flippers, sea lions use their front flippers. Now I also mentioned that walruses are part of this group of pinnipeds. Pinniped means feather-footed. So if we look at their feet or their flippers, they kind of look like wings. And walruses also are part of that category, but we don't have any here at the Aquarium of the Pacific. So these happen to be two really cool marine mammals, but of course there are other marine mammals too. So let's take a look at another marine mammal. What's another one that you can think of? Maybe one that you're interested in or that you like. Well, this is one that I think happens to be one of the cutest of all of the marine mammals. And what is that? What is it that makes it so cute? And what kind of animal is this? Do you know? Well, do you think it's a seal or sea lion? Obviously, there are some major differences. This one doesn't have those big front flippers. Instead, it has paws. And is this one hairy? Absolutely. This one has actually the most hair of any animal in the animal kingdom as far as how much hair per square inch of their body. They have the densest hair. In fact, they have so much hair on 1 square inch of their body, like the space the size of a quarter, or if you were to make like an OK symbol, you could count the hairs, and on some otters, this is a sea otter, you could count up to 1,000,000 hairs in that one spot. That is the equivalent of about 7 human heads of hair. So if we were to shave all the hair off your head and find 6 other family members and shave all of their hair off their heads and squeeze all that hair into a space that big, that's about how much hair is on 1 square inch of a sea otter's body. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, so sea otters have this really great hair. In fact, I have a sample of what sea otter hair looks like right here. So we'll go to my document cam and I'm going to zoom in a little bit. So little by little, you can see this is some pretty hairy hair. Now let's go in a little bit more. Let's see, we'll see what the limit is on my camera here, how much we can zoom. Whew, that's pretty good. Give it a second to focus. Let's see if it'll get any better. Oh, yeah. So many hairs in here. If I move it up, maybe you can see some of the other. You'll notice some of the hairs look kind of stiff, like those hairs on the bottom look a little bit thicker. Those would be like the outer guard hairs. And then look at these lighter hairs. They look much fluffier. So these are not necessarily really thick hairs, the individual hairs. They're actually kind of thin, but they do a really good job of helping that sea otter to keep itself warm. So this is kind of that inner layer that you see on the, or that you wouldn't normally see on the sea otter's body, but what's below those outer dark hairs. And what they do is they trap air so that in between all these hairs, air can get trapped, and it helps provide an insulation layer. So what happens is they have so much hair, or so much hair, and trapping so much air in them that when they go diving underwater, the sea otter's skin doesn't even get wet. In fact, as I was pulling apart the sea otter fur, could you even see where the skin was? You can't really see. There's just so much in there, you can't even get down to where the skin is. So it creates a really great barrier to prevent them from getting the cold water up against their skin and making them cold. So that is how sea otters are able to keep themselves really, really warm in really, really cold water. So they rely on hair for insulation, and they have paws, we said, instead of flippers. But maybe we should look at another picture. Let's see what their nose looks like. Let's see if it's any different than the seal or sea lion noses. So here's one of our otters. Aw, isn't it cute? Kind of a different shape. This one's a little bit more like a diamond shape. But believe it or not, they can also close their nose. So their nose looks a little bit different in shape, but they do have the ability to squeeze off their nostrils and close their noses when they go diving too. But what about the ears? Do they have ears that stick out? Do you see any ears on their body? Well, maybe not right here, but if you see this little dark spot right there, that is actually a sea otter ear that's sticking out between all the hairs on the side of its head. And they can also close off their ears so they don't get water going into their ears. Isn't that cool? They can close their nose and their ears without having to put their paws up to it. And if you look at their body, you'll notice they have a kind of a long body, again, very, very furry, the paws up in the front, and then in the back, they have flippers that also help them to swim underwater. Having flippers really is efficient for an animal living in the water. Very different than what you and I have, or mammals that we see on land. They also have a tail, a cute little tail that gives them some balance and trails behind them as they're swimming. Let's go ahead and take a look at another picture of an otter. Let's see what else we can show. This one. This one's in the water. And what do you notice about it? What do you think it's doing right now? And how is it swimming? Well, looks like this one's floating on its back. That's very common for otters to float on their backs, and then they use their bellies like a dining room table when they're eating their meal, just like this one is. So this one has something in its hand, I can't tell for sure, maybe a crab. Kind of looks like a crab, like little crab legs sticking out. So sea otters are really good predators. They're great at hunting crabs, other types of invertebrates, which are animals without backbones, like clams or sea stars. In fact, one of the things that sea stars or that sea otters will do with sea stars is they will take two sea stars and then put them together like a sandwich so that their sticky feet, their tube feet on the middle, can stick to the other sea star so that when the sea otter eats it, it doesn't get sticky tube feet all over itself. So that's kind of a fun little thing about otters. But otters also have been known for using tools. Do you know what type of tool an otter would use? Obviously not a drill, no screwdrivers, but they have been known to use something kind of like a hammer. Now, not with the big long stick on it, but they do use what kind of thing would be in the ocean that they could use to hammer something. And not because they're drilling nails into a wall, but rather because they're trying to crack something open, something that's hard, like a clamshell, since they do love to eat things like mussels and clams, or abalone, things with hard shells, even a sea urchin, for example. They need to crack it open. And so what they'll do is they will grab a rock. They can grab a rock from the bottom, and then they have these really cool built-in pockets in their bodies. And the sea otters can take that rock and stick it in their pocket. And you know where their pocket is located? It's not in their pants. It's in their armpit. So what they do is they have this extra flap of skin, and they take anything that they find, they can stick it in their pocket of their armpit, and then use it kind of like a carrying case until they get back up to the surface, get on their backs, and then they can crack it open on their belly. So they can crack open things like urchins and all those hard-shelled animals. In fact, there's a really important reason that we want sea otters in the water to eat those urchins. There's another picture we have of a sea urchin. So if you're not sure what a sea urchin looks like, it's kind of this big pokey ball. It's purple. Here we go. And it's got spines all over its body. But look at this other thing that the urchin is on top of. Do you know what this is? This right here is a blade of kelp. Now, kelp is an important part of the ecosystem right off our coast here in Southern California, where we have these beautiful kelp forests. But the problem is that sea otters, or sea urchins rather, love to eat kelp. They have little teeth on the underside of their mouths that help them to chew the kelp and to scrape algae off rocks. But you'll notice that this one does not have any flippers like our mammals that we were looking at. And so it pretty much sits on the bottom. It doesn't have a way of swimming around the ocean. They spend all their time on the bottom of the ocean. Well, the bottom of the ocean is where this kelp is attached. So the kelp forest grows up to the very surface to get all the sunlight that it can, but it's anchored in place at the bottom with something called a holdfast, where it's holding onto the rocks. Well, then when these urchins are down there on the bottom and they start chewing the kelp down at the holdfast, what's going to happen to that big long blade of kelp that's creating our kelp forest habitat? It's going to float away. So if we have too many urchins in the water, we're going to end up losing a lot of our kelp. And so that's where the sea otter comes in, because the sea otters love to eat urchins. And so when the sea otters are eating the urchins aren't eating as much kelp, so it's continuing to provide a nice home and habitat for all the animals that rely on the kelp forest for their home out in the ocean. The problem is that if we take the sea otters out of the environment, well, what happens to all the urchins? Well, the urchins start to explode. All these urchins are around, and they're eating all the kelp, and they're eating more and more kelp, and so more and more kelp is disappearing, and then all the animals relying on the kelp forest are losing their homes as well. So it's really important to have sea otters in the habitat. It's what we call a keystone species. Very, very important role in the ecosystem. So we've talked about sea otters, we've talked about seals and sea lions. Now we get to talk about one of my favorite ones that live in the ocean, both whales and dolphins. I love them. So let's get a picture of a whale or a dolphin up here and see what types of things you notice that would help this mammal survive in the ocean habitat. So here are some beautiful dolphins. I just think they're gorgeous. I fell in love with dolphins when I was in 3rd grade. The first time I ever saw a dolphin, actually, to tell you the truth, the first time I saw a dolphin, I thought it was a shark. So I didn't know very much. But I didn't grow up around the ocean. But later I learned that, yes, these are not sharks. These are not fish. They are mammals. But How does that fit in with what we know about mammals? Didn't we just say that all mammals have hair? Do you see any hair on these dolphins? Have you ever seen a dolphin wearing braids? Nope, doesn't happen. Well, they don't have a lot of hair, but believe it or not, when the dolphin was born, it had little tiny hairs right on this little snout area. We call that the rostrum. And when the little baby dolphin has hairs, what they can do is when they're ready to eat, they go on up to mama dolphin and they go tickle, tickle, tickle with their little hairs on their rostrum. And then mama dolphin knows that it's time to give them their food to help them eat. Now, dolphins eventually will eat things like squid and fish. But what do all baby mammals drink when they're babies? Milk. And so, yes, even dolphins have milk and are fed milk. They're not fed milk from a bottle, but mama dolphin gives them milk to drink when they're babies. And she produces that milk herself and squirts it into the water, and the dolphins are able to eat it. And they continue to eat that until they build up this nice, thick layer of fat. So they don't rely on their hair to keep them warm like the sea otters do. They rely on blubber. So the blubber is the layer that's underneath their body that's warm, or it keeps them warm with all this fat insulation. Same thing that seals and sea lions have, because remember how we saw very, very short hairs on the seal and sea lions' bodies? Those hairs don't keep them very warm, but that blubber that they have underneath that hair does. So they have hair to keep them warm. Let's see, we said mammals have hair. Oh, they also breathe air, don't they? Isn't that one thing that's true of all mammals? Well, the dolphins live underwater, and we talked about the noses on the other animals. What about the nose of a dolphin? We said this was their snout, but do you see a nose on here anywhere? They don't have nostrils here, but do you notice that hole? That hole is, do you know what it's called? It's got a special name on whales and dolphins. It's called a blowhole. And what do you think goes in and out of that blowhole? I realize some of you are probably thinking water, but that's not what it is. It's used for breathing, and we said that they breathe air since they're mammals. So the blowhole is used for breathing air in and out of their lungs. So that's what's happening. But you might think, wait a minute, I've seen all these pictures and drawings of whales that are blowing water out, like a spout of water out the top of their hole. So what's going on with that? Well, like I said, they're all breathing air. But when an animal that's underwater, that's been holding its breath for a long time, before it can come up to the surface and take a new breath, what does it need to do? Imagine. Go ahead, take a deep breath. Go. Okay, now take another breath. You can't take another breath until you let the other breath out, right? So take a big deep breath and then let it out. Well, when whales come up to the surface, they have to breathe it out too. They have to let that all out first. And they've been holding their breath for a long time, and the longer you hold your breath, the more you want to get it out really, really fast. Well, what happens if you're underwater and you start to go before you're at the surface, just like this whale did? This is a perfect example. Maybe we can play this back again when this one's done. Is when they're underwater, if you go and there's a whole bunch of water in front of you, what's going to happen? Well, you're going to end up blowing that water out, and it's going to look like a spout, just like what this gray whale was doing when it came up to the surface. So what you're seeing is not the water that's inside the whale. What you're seeing instead is the water that's on top of the blowhole, see, while it's underwater. And so as it forces all that air out of its lungs, it's also causing the water that's on top of the blowhole to go up into the air too, which is great for those of us who like to go whale watching. This is one of the best ways to spot a whale, is by looking for what we call a blow. And that blow is just simply the water that's on top of their blowhole that is being shot into the air as they very forcefully exhale. Isn't that cool? Did you know that? Well, now you know. And what's really cool about this is, do you notice something strange about the water around this whale? Do you notice a color change? Look at that brown water. Well, no, this whale was not going to the bathroom, if that's what you were thinking. Instead, this is a whale that's eating, because gray whales have a very unusual way of eating food. They have something in their mouth called baleen. And I have a plate of whale baleen from, oops, it's going to be It's kind of hard to see. It looks like it's reflecting some green on it, so there's holes. There's not really a hole in here. It's just the color. It's blending in with my screen behind me. And so this whale baleen, let me take it over to my document camera so maybe you can see it a little bit better. I'll just put it here. We'll zoom out. So this is whale baleen. It's kind of a yellow. So this is coming from a gray whale. This one came from a gray whale, and it has one long edge. This would be the part that would face the outside of the whale's mouth. So they have hundreds of these plates lined up next to each other inside the whale's mouth. And then this part right here, see how it's kind of these frayed edges? Well, this would be the part on the inside lined up with all these other plates that would be rubbing up against the whale's tongue. So this is what the whale's tongue would use to help, or not what the whale's tongue. This would be brushing up against the whale's tongue, and as these little pieces of like this hair-like material are being kind of overlapped with the ones next to them, this is creating like a little filter for any tiny animals that might be in the water, or in the gray whale's case, the mud of the ocean floor. They eat food that is not swimming around in the water column like other whales. Some whales are what we call gulpers, and they take in a giant gulp of water with all these little tiny fish and krill in it, and then they filter it out through their plates of baleen. They force that water out through their mouth again, but all the stuff in the water gets caught in their baleen, and then they take their giant tongue, wipe it off, and swallow it. But the gray whale, it is a different type of feeder. It has this baleen on the roof of its mouth, but it's not gulping. Notice this one doesn't have all, well, you can't really tell on here, I guess, but a gray whale, if you were to look at their body, on the underside, they don't have all those lines that work like pleats to help a whale expand their throat area. Instead, they are mudsuckers. Yes, you heard me right. They are sucking up the mud on the bottom of the ocean floor, looking for little tiny animals that live in the mud. Ugh, would you want to get your meal out of the mud every day? Well, that's what gray whales do. And so they go down to the bottom, they turn on their sides, usually it's their right side, and then they pull up any of that mud that's in there, and then they force the mud out back through their mouth, and all those little critters in the ocean floor get caught in their baleen, and they're able to eat them. They call them amphipods. That's what gray whales like to eat. So that's what we saw flowing out of the water, or flowing out the mouth of that whale, was all the mud that they were filtering out. Maybe we can watch that video one more time. So the whale that we saw that was blowing, here we have all that brown water around it. That is the mud. So they're straining it up. They have their mouth full of all their food, but they don't want to swallow that mud, so they want to spit it out. So they spit it out through the sides of their mouth. You saw it come out right there. Isn't that cool? So gray whales are the only whales we know of that have this sort of feeding method where they feed off the mud, or what's living in the mud on the bottom of the ocean. But there's other whales like the humpback whale that has a very different sort of look to them, or even blue whales that have long streams. Maybe we can show you a picture real quick of that before we end our stream, because we've talked about whales that have teeth, like the dolphins. And yes, dolphins are considered whales as well. So they're just a toothed whale. So there's two different types of whales that have baleen, and then whales that have teeth. Now, the dolphins are considered a toothed whale, and this animal, the humpback whale, is considered a baleen whale. And so they have all these plates of baleen inside their mouth. Now, I showed you one plate of baleen from a gray whale. Let me show you what it looks like when we're talking about a humpback whale baleen. This is actually several plates. I think there's maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, like 15 plates right here of baleen. But this is what it looks like on the other side. So this would be the part up against the whale's tongue that's creating that filter for all the krill or little tiny fish that might be in the water. And this part right up here, this is actually the part that would be in their gums, up on the roof of their mouth. So again, this would be the part on the outside, this would be the part on the inside, and this is the side view of how their baleen is hanging inside their mouth. And this is from a humpback whale. Well, I hope that you've enjoyed learning a little bit more about marine mammals with me. If you had some questions that came up during our time together and you want to email them to us, we'd be happy to respond to your email questions with the question or with the address on the bottom, live@lbaop.org, and we would be happy to respond to them. So thank you for joining us. I hope you're interested in learning more about whales and dolphins and marine mammals of all sorts. And if you ever want to come visit the aquarium, we have some of them to show you. Now, the whales and dolphins, you'll have to go out on one of our whale watch cruises to see those. But we have a number of whales and dolphins right off our coast here in Southern California that we can show you in their natural habitat. So hopefully you'll get a chance to view some in some way, whether you're on a whale watching boat or whether you're able to visit another zoo or aquarium and check out these amazing animals. But have a wonderful day, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye.